In this video, we will talk about biconditional statements. A biconditional between P and Q is the conjunction of two conditionals. P implies Q and Q implies P. And we denote it by this notation, P and Q with arrow both ways. In symbolic form, we can write that as P implies Q and Q implies P is same as P if and only if Q. So we read this as P if and only if Q. This is also often written as P is necessary and sufficient for Q. So here is a diagram for a biconditional P if and only if Q. So this is same as saying P if Q and P only if Q. P if Q means Q implies P, and P only if Q means P implies Q. So we have P if and only if Q. Now let's look at truth table for P if and only if Q. So we want to have columns for P, Q, P implies Q, Q implies P, and if we combine these two by AND, we get P if and only if Q. Now we want to look at all the possible combinations of truth values of P and Q. For that, we can put down true, true, false, false, and true, false, true, false. P implies Q, true implies true is true, true implies false is false, and the other two are true vacuously. Similarly, Q implies P, true implies true is true, false implies true is true, true implies false is false, and the last one, false implies false is true. Now for P if and only if Q, we just combine these two by AND. So true and true is true, false and true is false, true and false is false, and true is true. So these are the truth values for P if and only if Q. Next, we will look at some examples. So here we want to write these biconditionals as conjunction of two if-then statements. The first one, this month is January if and only if the next month is February. So in symbolic form, this month is January, we can denote this part by J, and the next month is February, we can denote this part by F. So we have J if and only if F. This we can write as J implies F and F implies J. So let's try to write this in words. We get J implies F is if this month is January, then the next month is February. So this is one direction. And the other direction is F implies J. For that, we can write if the next month is February, then this month is January. Then this month is January. Now let's look at the next example. It snows if and only if it does not rain. So again here, if we denote S by its nose, and it does not rain by R, so here we have S if and only if, well, if we denote it rains by R, it snows by S, and it rains by R. So let's say it rains by R. So here we have S if and only if, not R. So this we can write as S implies not R, and not R implies S. So this in words we can write as if it snows, then it does not rain. Since we have not R, it does not rain, and not R implies S. And if it does not rain, then it snows. So this is the conjunction of two conditionals for this biconditional. Let's look at the next example now. Here we have X is even. Let's denote this by E. If and only if X is divisible by 2, I'm going to denote this by D. So here we have E if and only if D. This we can write as E implies D and D implies E, which we can write in words as if X is even, then X is divisible by 2, and the other direction. And if X is divisible by 2, then X is even. Right? So let's look at the next example now. Here let's denote the statement that n is prime by P, and the statement that n is odd by O, and the statement that n is 2 by T. So here we have P if and only if O or T, O or T. This is same as saying P implies O or T, and O or T implies P. So for the first part, we can say if P is prime, then O or T, then N is odd or N is 2. This is one direction. And if O or T, if N is odd or N is 2, then N is prime. And this one back here should be N. Right, so now let's look at the last example here. Let's denote this statement, N is divisible by 2 by T. Let's denote this statement, N is divisible by 3 by H, and denote this statement, N is divisible by 6 by S. So here we are given T and H if and only if S. This is equivalent to saying T and H implies S, and S implies T and H. Now let's write the this conjunction in words. So we have T and H implies S. This we can write as if N is divisible by 2 and N is divisible by 3, then N is divisible by 6. This is one direction. And the other direction, if S, then T and H. If N is divisible by 6, then N is divisible by 2 and N is divisible by 3. By 2 and N is divisible by 3. We are done with these examples. Next, we want to write these biconditionals using necessary and sufficient. The first one says this month is January if and only if the next month is February. So we can write this month being January is necessary and sufficient that, or I can say this way, that the next month is February. The next example, it snows if and only if it does not rain. Using necessary and sufficient, we can write this as, we can rephrase this in a little different way so that it makes sense in English. Maybe I can say snowing is necessary and sufficient for not raining. The next example, we can write this as the number x being even is necessary and sufficient for x being divisible by 2. Divisible by 2. The next example, the same idea. We can say n being prime is necessary and sufficient that n is odd or n is 2. Or we could say n being odd or n being 2. All right. The last one here, let me write it in a little different way, that n is divisible by 2 and n is divisible by 3 is necessary and sufficient. That n is divisible by 6.